Courtesy of Citizens for Free Speech, I will present to you a list of ways that you are mind-controlled. When I was barely a teenager, I saw a list of propaganda techniques like this, and it changed my life because I was able to recognize when media and government were messing with me. Since that time, media has become more and more controlled to manipulate public opinion, to promote ideological bias, to outright lie to us, and to psychologically push us in all kinds of directions. It's not just the commercials or the ideologically biased news programs. We are now assaulted with subliminal messages in our TV shows, movies, video games, social networks, cell phone apps. There is now hardly any honest, objective mass media left. So to have any chance of finding the truth, it is critical that we are all able to recognize the tricks and techniques that are being used to make us think and do what other people want us to think and do. In this video, I will give you a list of most of those techniques, and after you see these, you will be much more able to recognize when you are being mind-controlled. You may notice that most of these propaganda techniques are based on emotions, not facts. To convince someone with facts, you must have their intellectual engagement. But emotion will engage us even when there are no facts to support the message. Propaganda does not care about the truth. Quite often, the purpose of propaganda is to defy the truth and disregard the facts. Emotional images and messages are how they do that. So I'll start with the propaganda trick known as the bandwagon. One of our weaknesses is that we want to be normal. Most of us want to fit in, so they can tell us to jump on the bandwagon. If we think everyone else is doing it, we believe we should do it as well. We think that the group is smarter than us, and we don't want the group to think we are weird or contrary. So the propaganda is telling us that something is popular, and that can easily make us do things we would not otherwise do. Of course, in this way, we can be made to follow people right off the edge of a cliff. Trends can be started just by media telling us there is a trend. Unfortunately, it is human nature to follow the group even when it does not make much sense to do so. Certainly the most powerful propaganda device is fear. After 9/11, we saw government use terrorism as an excuse to take government secret, to enact laws and policies that violate the Constitution, to implement mass surveillance on every American, and to invade country after country in a global campaign to bring destruction and death to anyone resembling a terrorist. Our government has a basket of threats which it uses to seize power and control and money. So if it is not terrorism, it is climate change or a pandemic, hyperinflation, a currency collapse, a war, an asteroid heading for planet Earth. And they are even talking about hostile aliens coming to attack us. Fear, fear, fear. All of those things are at a national or global scale. So these are the perfect ways to get little you and me to beg for collective action, and for governments to then operate outside their legal jurisdictions and jack our taxes to the sky. Without some huge threat to mankind, government's role is very mundane. You will always see government and media spreading fear, contriving demons, and literally causing disasters in the hope we will tolerate or even call for government expansion. Call to duty is the technique of telling you that you are not a good person unless you do something or believe something. Wear a mask and get a vaccination, or you are killing your grandmother. If you don't vote, you are a bad citizen. By making you think it is your civic duty or humanitarian responsibility, you can be pushed to do things that may not be good for you or other people. Again, this call to duty is an emotional, not factual appeal. Human nature makes us want to be a good person and be judged well. So it is a way that we can be prodded to conform to some big plan by telling us we have some duty to go along. Card stacking. This is just saying all the good things about something and leaving out all the bad things, or just saying all the bad things and leaving out the good things. This is the purpose of censorship, to see that certain ideas reach you and others do not. Perhaps one of the most striking examples of card stacking was the year after year hammering of Donald Trump by the press during his presidency. Donald Trump was as popular as many other presidents, according to his polls and his rally turnouts. But the left-leaning press attacked him day after day for years, like no other president in history. Of course, the right-leaning press then did the same thing to Joe Biden. Our mainstream news outlets will probably never be objective and balanced again, even though objectivity used to be the goal and hallmark of good journalism. When opposing political sides do this negative card stacking, it tends to make people disgusted with all candidates and the whole political process. When they do positive card stacking, it tends to make us trust systems which are badly corrupted. Plain folks, most Washington career politicians have no clue what it is like to live the life of an average citizen and taxpayer. They know that we do not want to be led by people who are themselves rich, powerful, and out of touch. While we are struggling every day to make ends meet and provide for our families, those embarrassing posed clips of some elite politician eating ice cream or adopting mannerisms of common folk or visiting places where real people have real problems, it's pure theater to make us think they are just like us and they might understand us. That is usually far from the truth. People who live and work in Washington, D.C., especially those who spend their lives there, have a very distorted view of reality compared to the average American. The testimonial, this is one of the most common techniques of propaganda, and is some celebrity or credible personality that you can identify with telling you some anecdote as a soft sell sales pitch. That anecdote can be very suggestive to us. But of course, anyone can make up a story or anecdote to promote anything. Fake testimonials are bombarding us continually. Glittering generalities. Ignoring all facts and riding on pure emotion, you will hear phrases like, giving us a better future, or socially responsible, or the better and greener solution, or we are all in this together. These phrases have no useful purpose other than to associate a vaguely positive emotional feeling with some idea, some product, some brand. Usually, when we hear these broad platitudes, facts and common sense are scarce. Name-calling and deflection. This means attacking the message by attacking the messenger. Name-calling and deflection from the message and pointing out the personal flaws of the messenger, whether true or not, can make us turn against the idea that the person is promoting. They try and destroy the message by destroying the personal character of the person bringing the message, destroying the reputation, usually with fabrication and lies. They say the person is a conspiracy theorist, or a liar, or a child molester, whatever will make the listener disbelieve or dislike the person bringing the message. We tend to believe these false characterizations because they tend to stick in people's minds even when they are not supported by any facts. When someone discovers a conspiracy, simply calling them a conspiracy theorist falsely discredits their findings. Some peaceful protesters have been called domestic terrorists, while some rioters have been called peaceful protesters. Transfer. This is the technique of associating something people like with something they want people to like. This can be putting a beautiful model next to a product, or a star athlete likes a particular brand of shoes. If a well-known figure gives an endorsement, it transfers the popularity of the personality to the idea being promoted. How many times have we seen the pharmaceutical product commercial where the family is having blissful and happy times because someone has taken a prescription drug? The reality is that drug use does not usually lead to family bliss. Like most propaganda techniques, this works best when we are not consciously analyzing the use of propaganda, but just letting all the messages enter our heads without much thought. False analogy. Having this breath mint is like taking a bobsled ride down a glacier. Voting for this candidate will put the country on the right track. A stay at a Hilton hotel is like stepping into another world. The false analogy is the technique of associating a product, service, or idea with a far better idea that may not actually be connected in any way. Either-or fallacy. If you are not supporting this, you are the enemy. This is a black and white approach which disallows all debate, all critical thinking, and all nuance. You are for this or you are a bad person. Like many propaganda tricks, this does the most damage when one person accepts the trick and then judges other people when they don't jump on board. This technique was used during the pandemic and lockdowns, where health officials were making broad mandates which quite often were not based on any true science or even common sense. They weren't even lawful, and they had the effect of destroying national economies. Faulty cause and effect. We have to see this technique every time there is a mass shooting. We are told if they could only take all the guns away from law-abiding gun owners, this would reduce mass shootings. There's no logic to that at all, but it is tempting to believe it. Obviously, criminals will always have guns. And a closer look at those shootings shows that it is psychotropic prescription drugs causing the rage. And the guns are incidental at best. So the true cause is usually drugs, but government and media seize on the event as an excuse to disarm the public. When government wants you to believe something, they'll show you dead bodies or suffering people. That visual emotional impact is literally a memory-aiding mechanism. Another faulty cause and effect message is that if we recycle, we will save the environment. If they stopped selling toxic and wasteful packaging, it would help the environment. This is faulty cause and effect. They're blaming us for what they are selling to us. Euphemisms. This is a way to make something bad sound good. Pedophiles have referred to themselves as minor attracted individuals, as if pedophilia were some legitimate alternate sexual orientation, and as if pedophilia were not extremely damaging to children and society. Of course, pedophiles would like to be seen as just another legitimate subgroup of society. But that would require putting a blind eye to the damage they do. The euphemism confuses our minds by transferring ideas into different moral contexts. If someone physically attacks their neighbor for not recycling, the press might refer to them as a troubled environmentalist, when they are perhaps more accurately a violent lunatic, and the environmental aspect is simply being used by the media to emotionally color the story. Loaded words. Many parents were protesting medical mandates at school board meetings, and our security agencies started classifying them as domestic terrorists. Perfectly peaceful January 6th protesters were being jailed indefinitely for supposedly committing treasonous sedition to overthrow the government. Preposterous fabricated allegations for peaceful and law-abiding citizens is one way a tyrannical government will project power. In order to silence someone, we call them a Nazi, white supremacist, racist, anti-Semitic, homophobic, misogynistic. We have all these loaded words. In this way, reasonable discussions can turn into insult battles, and reasonable viewpoints can be silenced. Scapegoat. This is the technique of transferring blame for something to a convenient but unrelated target. Having printed trillions of dollars and causing runaway inflation, the federal and banking officials claimed that inflation was caused by Russia invading Ukraine, as if printing trillions of dollars had nothing to do with causing inflation. This is ridiculous scapegoating of Russia. Anti-vaxxers were blamed for causing disease, but now we have found that the experimental injections caused more damage than COVID-19. So those who had reasonable suspicions about experimental injections were scapegoated to conceal the harm the injections were causing. Even small children use scapegoating when they blame their siblings for whatever made the parent angry. Logical disconnect. The World Economic Forum says you will own nothing and be happy. There's a massive logical disconnect here because they cannot explain how owning nothing would make someone happy. This idea that poverty equals happiness is doublespeak, like saying ignorance is strength, slavery is freedom. It is short-circuiting the brain. Any wealth manager will tell you that owning nothing is clearly the worst financial situation you could be in. By earning and collecting assets, you gain economic security, independence, self-determination. To say that owning nothing would lead to happiness is a blatant lie. which demonstrates the power of propaganda, because if we are not paying attention while they repeat such messages, it tends to rewire our brains to accept whatever we're being told. One huge piece of propaganda that has rewired most people's brains is the claim that we live in a democracy. In the USA, the Constitution does not contain the word democracy. The Founding Fathers hated the idea of democracy because it is mob rule. It is two wolves and a sheep deciding on what to have for dinner. They created a constitutional republic, not a democracy. We are supposed to have a system where individual rights are always superior to public consensus. Our politicians use the term democracy to discourage us from thinking in terms of our rights, and to cause us to think that we have to go along with the group even when it violates our individual rights. This is a way to make people compliant and sacrificial. It is much easier to control groups when you don't have to worry about anyone's individual rights. Calling America a democracy is a logical disconnect, and it is a dangerous lie. Our Constitution allows the use of democratic processes only when all individual rights and liberties are being observed. Of course, they continually try and tell us that we must sacrifice our rights and liberty for the good of the whole. When everyone's rights and liberties are being taken away, it's hard to see how that could be good for the whole. But that is how the logical disconnect works. Numerical and technical symbology. People tend to believe numbers and graphs. If we are being told by established media that inflation is at 2%, we tend to accept that without knowing how that number was arrived at. We do this even when common sense should indicate that inflation is around 20% or higher. If we see a graph or chart, we tend to internalize the graph's proportions and accept that as fact. It is now well known that governments' published statistics are ridiculously inaccurate and consistently skewed to produce some desired political effect. Many of us refuse to believe that government would lie or that our favorite media would lie. Our failure to suspect lying makes it easier to lie to us. Then, of course, repetition of a lie breaks down resistance to the lie. Believe the science, believe the science, believe the science. Okay, what's the science? They never tell you what the science is. They just tell you to believe it over and over. Whatever they tell you is the science, is the science. If some good, credible scientists arise with better information, conflicting information, they'll be immediately attacked and destroyed. Science is never conclusive. Science is an endless search, an endless questioning of what we think we know. The idea that any science can be conclusive is pure propaganda. The idea that public policy should not change while science is always changing, it's pure propaganda. So how do we avoid being manipulated by propaganda? We simply stay aware and alert that it is all around us all the time, and we have to take a step back and look for these techniques. Not simply accept everything as if we were in a trance. Not be emotionally captured by messages and images. And we need to talk with others about how we are being played. Any message that seems to be repeated a lot in the media is almost certainly some propaganda campaign. Any message that uses some emotional trigger and advocates some kind of behavior is probably propaganda. This is not just going on in advertising and politics. It's in all of our entertainment, all of our social networks, and we get it repeated to us by our family and friends. One of the best propaganda devices is the video game, where we can be programmed with messages while we are emotionally engaged in the game. By knowing these techniques, it should help you avoid getting sidetracked and diverted by mind control and hidden agendas. I thank Citizens for Free Speech for compiling this information. To find out more about CFFS, go to citizensforfreespeech.org.
Please support these videos by visiting our sponsor page at preparewithjerry.com for our top quality long-term storage emergency food. We work with the nation's top supplier, which has delivered several million orders to homes just like yours. And we do mean long-term storage. With one order, you have emergency food lasting up to 25 years, as near as your closet or pantry. These food kits can get you and your family through any difficulties that may lie ahead. We update preparewithjerry.com regularly with seasonal discounts and special packages. Having food storage at hand is more than insurance. It is peace of mind. Go to preparewithjerry.com. preparewithjerry.com.